Hey, fitness pros, would you be surprised if I told you there's been an 88% increase in exercise during the pandemic? And maybe you won't be surprised by the fact that only 30% of gym members are back in the gym right now. Between 46 and up to about 59% in two different surveys say they may never return. And if you have a brick and mortar business, you've been working for one for a long time, you may feel a little bit lost or wonder what's your future like. My guest today is Paul Ronto. He's going to be talking a little bit about his response to this from his website and surveys they're conducting with over 10,000 people in each. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to the Voice for Fitness Professionals podcast, where I address your top questions, marketing and sales, and share with you strategies that are anything but sleazy, pushy, or salesy, so that you can build a life and a business that you love during even the pandemic. My guest today is Paul Ronto, and Paul loves adventure. Over the last 20 years, he's climbed, hiked, and ran all over the world. He's summited peaks throughout the Americas, trekked through Africa, and tested his endurance in 24-hour trail races. He's worked in the outdoor industry for over a decade and continues to focus on athletic pursuits. So I know a lot of you are saying, my kind of guy. Paul, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So listeners, I want them to know how we met. And literally, this is really our first meet, is kind of unraveling here while literally we're in real time. But I ran across some great statistics, kind of hunting and searching during this pandemic, looking for what is happening right now with the concern I have for the fitness industry, both for myself, but all the peers and all the students over 36 years that I've taught and mentored, what's going to be the face of the future. That's how I found Runrepeat.com. So, Paul, can you just share a little bit about it?
Yeah, of course. So at a broad scope, Runrepeat, our mission is to help people buy athletic footwear online. Obviously buying shoes online can be difficult. And so what we do is we aggregate user and expert reviews on athletic footwear. We're actually the biggest athletic footwear review site on the web. And so that's what we do for our day-to-day business. But we have a really fun, exciting part of our team that focuses on creating really interesting content around sport, around data related to sport, and around the health and fitness industry. So, I think that's where you found us, is looking up some of our articles that we've published in the past few months. But, we do a lot, and our main focus really is to help people find the right footwear so they can enjoy their sports to the max.
So awesome. And for listeners, I'll keep that link. We'll have it in the show notes, of course, afterward. And that'll be flipping50.com/run. If you happen to be listening to the Fitness Professionals podcast, that'll be Fitness Marketing Mastery/run, because we are double dipping today. But I want to kind of, before we dive into the statistics, the crazy statistics I teased in the opener, I want to just understand a little bit. And I think this is fair to try to ask the questions my listeners might be asking. Can you share a little bit about how you survey? What were your survey methods, maybe who you surveyed, and share those details for listeners so they know how that was conducted?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first off, our articles can be difficult to find sometimes. There's not like a clear blog section on our website, but if you're interested in all of our content, it's just runrepeat.com/news, and that'll take you to all our articles. And a couple of years ago, we pivoted to try to figure out how could we do database articles. And one of the answers that came up was, let's talk to our users. I mean, we have over 3 million, or just about 3 million users a month on our site. And so we thought, these are people that are buying athletic shoes. They're into sports. They're obviously interested in the product. They're doing these sports most likely. Let's pull them. And so we have a pretty good machine that we can pump a survey out onto our site. We can target it based on if they're looking for running shoes specifically, or they're looking for basketball shoes, if we're interested in basketball data. So we can target our users fairly closely based on what sport they're interested in. And we can send those surveys out to a ton of people pretty quick. Some of these surveys that we've done recently, we try to hit that 10,000 survey benchmark. Some of the old studies we've done, we've looked at like race statistics, and we've done over 2 million data points. So we try to get as much data as possible so that we can have a fairly good sample of the topic we're talking about. But mostly, to answer your question simply, we survey people on our site. So users looking for athletic shoes who are in this space, we ask their opinion. And, we have awesome users, and we've been grateful to them to be willing to take part in these surveys.
Fantastic. Okay. So from what you've said, basically everybody who responded to your survey probably is an active enthusiast. So they're already participating. We're not talking to couch potatoes. And if we go back and say, all right, this is the thing that snapped my head in your direction, there's been an 88% increase in exercise during the pandemic. That's pretty darn amazing. So that just helped me, sort through what's happening here. My questions are, is that, first of all, what qualified for exercise? Can you tell me that as you ask the question?
Sure. And I want to clarify that we didn't see an 88% increase overall. What we saw was that people who were only exercising 1 to 2 times a week prior to the pandemic, so the people that are on the lower end of the spectrum for how often they exercise, their actually exercise is up 88%. What's interesting is people that exercise the most, so the group of people that exercise 4 or more times a week, their exercise is actually down a little bit. So what's interesting is to us is that the not the avid exercisers, the people who just dabble in keeping their fitness up are actually finding time and motivation to get outside, to go exercise more than they had before the pandemic had started. And to us, that's really telling. The people that exercise 5, 6 times a week, their gyms closed, their opportunity kind of got taken away. And so they're, at the beginning of this pandemic, they were trying to regroup and figure out how do we continue to exercise. And so they saw a little dip. But what's really, really fun to see is that these people that don't exercise that much are really getting out there more often now that the pandemic has set in.
Yeah. And I love that you clarified that, especially for my listeners who are, somewhere between late 40s, and I was going to say perimenopause and postmenopause, but to define that, those later years in perimenopause are probably a woman's mid to late 40s, and we've got listeners in their 70s as well, and they're at risk right now for losing muscle and losing bone. And, when I say right now, meaning in their life, in this moment that they're in, that's accelerated, from 45 to 55. And now here we are, we're at home. Those people who were in a gym, my bigger question for my audience members and also for the trainers and health coaches that serve them are our next step I see is, are they exercising right? Are we preserving muscle loss and bone losses that are accelerated during this, 10-year time or 3 to 5 for any one woman? And you didn't necessarily look specifically at strength training versus running versus walking, did you? Or clarify for me if you did and I missed it.
No, we really didn't differentiate how people are exercising, more so the frequency of which people are doing physical activity. We did pull out running because a lot of our audience are runners. And so we pulled out running specifically, but for the most part, we were looking at the frequency of exercise. Now, what I think is interesting is you talk about people not having access to a gym. We've done a couple other studies, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's really interesting that almost 60% of people haven't returned to the gym that were gym members before the pandemic started. And so there's this huge group of people that doesn't have their normal outlet to be able to go get that physical fitness in because gyms are either unsafe still or people don't feel comfortable or, there's a large percentage of gyms that just haven't reopened yet. And so I think it's a conundrum for sure, especially for the audience you're talking about, which may not have the tools at home to be able to create the workouts that they need to be able to stay healthy and fit in their 50s and 60s.
Yeah, and to anybody listening, and I appreciate you commenting that and adding that. To anybody listening, we don't want to discourage you. So we're thrilled that you've increased your activity. If you have, keep that up. Now it's just you've proven to yourself that you can create the habit. You can do it. And most likely you are feeling and potentially looking better. So taking the next step, really important. And here's, why I love that you added again the fact that it's actually those people who are at the gym who are or were more religious about it, who were going a little crazy and potentially needing to learn new tricks. Like they don't have that old comfortable pattern of going in and going into their routine. It's having to figure it out is actually looks like it's been a bigger obstacle than just doing a little bit more has been for the population. For instance, with women, one of the obstacles, I think, just walking is so accessible, so many health benefits, and not knocking that by any means, or yoga and Pilates, which might easily be done at home. While they're wonderful exercise, they won't necessarily sustain muscle and bone for a woman with accelerated losses happening due to hormonal changes. And who knew there'd be a dumbbell shortage in the world, right? I mean, if Amazon doesn't have it, we're in trouble, people. What do you think about the solution to that supply and demand problem?
Yeah, I mean, this was a major surprise, I think, to all of us of what went missing at the beginning of the pandemic. There was no toilet paper, there were no dumbbells, there were no kettlebells. It was really hard. It's still to this day, I think it's hard for people to buy a bike. I have friends who are trying to buy bikes for their kids as their kids grow out of their old bikes, and there's just no bikes for sale. Walmart doesn't have them. It's hard to get them on Amazon. So I think that it's hard to get some of the fitness equipment. And, the data that we were looking at, I think, anecdotally, I think what's interesting about it is the people who were really going to the gym a lot, they didn't know what to do. They didn't know where to put that time and energy into. And so we saw that decrease. Whereas the people that didn't exercise that much saw some personal time open up, I think, during the pandemic. Everyone's working from home. People are able to get out and walk, like you said. Maybe they can go running, which they didn't have time for before. The people that weren't going to the gym most likely were people who wanted to go to the gym. They just didn't have time. The life was just busy. And the pandemic has really slowed that down a bit. And I think it's awesome to see people taking advantage of that and finding time to get out and do things like walking and running that maybe don't need the dumbbells or the kettlebells. Now, I know that there's a problem without having the tools to be able to do some strength training. I think there's some ways that people can do strength training without a dumbbell or a kettlebell. Your body has a lot of functionality as far as a tool. There's a lot of body weight exercises that can replace the dumbbells and the kettlebells. And there's a ton of online streaming services that show people how to do these things. I remember, years and years ago having, I think it was called Insanity. It was like a online video workout. And they didn't use almost any tools. It was all body weight exercises. And it was for strength training and for cardiovascular fitness. But I think there's a lot you can do without the kettlebell and the dumbbells and the things that we're struggling to still find, even 8 months into this pandemic.
Yeah, so true. So very true. And to some of our audience members who may have, say, a shoulder issue, which is common. So it'll be knees first, often hips sometimes, and then shoulders. Sometimes, those solutions to bodyweight exercises actually aren't a good fit. But recently, I did a whole series in September of the fact that reminding people that your body doesn't know what shape that weight is in. So if you've got a backpack, stick your coffee table books in a backpack and you can do rows and chest press with all kinds of things. Pick up the dog food bag, right? Before you get into the bin, there's all kinds of ways. Used to be the farm boys In this
Yeah.
Midwest girls class that were the strongest, right?
Yeah, an easy one that I think anyone has access to is a gallon of water. You can go to the store and buy a gallon of water for 90 cents, and two of those, that's 8 pounds each. You got 16-pound dumbbells basically with a nice little handle. So you can be doing some light shoulder work. You can be doing some arm work. You can get a little bit of weight. Like you said, you can throw it into a backpack. There's a lot of things you can do to substitute a dumbbell. We don't need the tools that we thought we needed. We can substitute those things. Yeah, I mean, you're dead on. The people who lived out in the country and lived at the farms and were throwing bags of feed over their shoulder, they stayed in pretty good shape well into their older years. And it was just because they were doing these natural, difficult things that led to really great strength training.
So good. So good. So I'd love to kind of revisit, we've teased it a little bit, the gym members returning. So I think this is a valid discussion, and hopefully listeners, you'll give us a little latitude, because I don't know that we can necessarily say we've got all the answers, because I don't know that any of us do right now. But so bring me up to date, because I'm thinking, and I read that you'd listed that right now only about 30% of gym members are back in the gym, and somewhere between, depending on who I consult, between about 46 or 59% say they may not return. And is that a maybe not ever?
Yeah, so we actually have run 2 surveys on this, and we're running a third, and we probably plan to do a fourth because it's really interesting to us. But back in April, when this all started, we asked our audience, are you going to return to the gyms when they open? At this point, gyms across the world had closed down. And in America, about 50%, just slightly over 50%, said they would be likely to return to the gyms upon reopening. That was back in April. And so we wanted to see, what did people actually do now that gyms have reopened across the country for the most part. And we found out that although 50% said they would probably return, only about 30% have actually returned. And so that's a really alarming thing, both for the health and fitness of our country, but for the gym industry and the fitness industry. On top of that, like you said, just shy of 60%, 59 point something percent have canceled or are considering canceling their gym memberships moving forward. And the larger part of that number is 40% are considering canceling, whereas about 20% have already canceled. But even just 20% canceling their gym memberships is a pretty big downturn for the gym industry. And for us, it's a really alarming thing, because what happens to physical fitness of the populace? If 60% of people aren't going back to the gyms, what are they going to do? Are they going to keep the trend like we saw? Are they going to exercise more outside? Are they going to go for runs and walks and bike rides? Or are some of these people going to start exercising less and seeing some detraction from their fitness plan? And so we're super interested in this. I don't know if you've talked to Nick. Nick is our director of fitness content here at Runrepeat, and he's actually the one on the ground running these surveys for the gyms reopening pieces. And he's just like, I think, pretty blown away at the statistics we're seeing.
Yeah, and no, I haven't. I'm chasing that guy down, actually.
So well, I'll put in I think I can put in a good word for you.
Oh, you know somebody. Okay, yeah. Good. So, and just a couple of weeks ago, even as we're recording, it may be even less than that, Business Insider published an article that 5 major fitness chains and athletic stores combined declared bankruptcy. So what are your thoughts, if I can ask, on privately owned fitness businesses in the future?
I think it's really going to be tough. I mean, I think the boutique fitness arena is so unique compared to like the mega fitness, 24-hour fitness type of places. I think, I don't know how these gyms, whether they're boutique or mega gyms, are going to be able to continue to stay relevant for their clientele. Some have opened back up. Some have opened back up with major restrictions. Like I know Orange Theory, for example, has opened back up, and they only allow 15 people in each class, where they used to allow 45. Classes were 60 or 90 minutes. Now the classes are 45 minutes. So like there's just less opportunity for people to get into those gyms. I don't understand necessarily how the economics work in this scenario where if 60% of people don't return to the gym or cancel their memberships,
Yep.
how can they stay relevant? How can they stay open? And so that's a fear. Some of these big chains that are declaring bankruptcy, we'll see what happens. I mean, bankruptcy in my mind is very different than closing their doors. But I think the fitness world is seeing that things are changing drastically, and they need to evolve. They need to innovate. They need to figure out how to stay relevant. It's the whole Netflix versus Blockbuster thing all over again. And, there's one Blockbuster left in the country. And I hope that isn't the fate for physical gyms, for retail gyms, but we'll see. I mean, I don't want to speculate, but I think there's some really good options in the online world. I mean, there's options like Zwift and Peloton that are taking things virtual. That's a different experience than going to the gym and being motivated by a coach or those around you. But it's an option that's pretty innovative. And with what's going on in the world, it's safe. It's at home. So we'll see.
Yeah, totally agree. I think retailers like Peloton have, gained great success during this time. It's been an opportunity, which is historically what happens when chaos occurs. There will be those who won't survive, but there will be those who actually adapt and thrive. If I say the word pivot one more time in 2020, I'm probably going to throw up.
Yeah.
But
talking about pivoting, I mean, Peloton's great. Don't get me wrong, but it's really priced out of a lot of people's price range.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be self-gratuitous, but a pair of running shoes is pretty cheap. And I think a lot of people have seen that. Like, I can't go to the gym. Let's start running. And running, we have some studies. I don't know if you've seen our state of running studies, but we have studies that are showing that running has been in decline the last 3 or 4 years. And we're excited to do an update to that study in the next few months and show that running is seeing a pretty good surge right now with the pandemic because it's the only thing they can do, but people are getting back into the sport. And that's really reassuring for the sport of running, I think.
Yeah. And I there's something about it that I love for people who've never experienced that before, or who it's been such a long time since they have. I think we've all kind of got a little too dependent on being entertained while we exercise, or pushing the button and turning on the program to tell you, as opposed to deciding the speed or going the speed that feels good and letting your mind wander. If you can do that without an iPod in your ears.
Well, yeah, we've had to gamify everything in life to get people to do it. And exercise is just part of that trend. And, I mentioned Orange Theory. Orange Theory is the same thing. They gamify it by having the screen with your heart rate and how many calories you burned and all that. And, Zwift is gamifying races and bike rides. And, there's all these different companies. Peloton is gamifying it. So, it's interesting that we have to motivate people to stay fit with those kind of gimmicks. But, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. And I hope it works, because I don't want to see people losing this sense of fitness because they can't go to a gym anymore. They don't have a coach pushing them anymore. They don't have, someone at the gym motivating them because they want to look like them or they want to sweat harder. It's hard to motivate yourself. I will say that it's hard to motivate yourself to get up before work and go running, or after work to get out there. But we got to do it. Times are changing, and I think it's good to get back to the realization that fitness is a personal journey, and we don't necessarily need to have someone yelling in our ear to motivate us.
I love that quote. Fitness is a personal journey. I'm going to have to use that one. Okay. So I kind of want to summarize just a little bit before we wrap things up. So I kind of want to get back to just drawing this kind of conclusion or connection between the fact that so many more people may be discovering that they can do it, because maybe the fear of, a poor immune system, realizing that their health is one of the most important assets they've got. At the beginning, I think that was a question a lot of people had. How do I boost my immune system? How do I make sure that either I don't get it, if I get it, I'm strong enough to survive it? And now I think we've been in this moment long enough that bit of fear may have relaxed a little bit. People feel a little bit more comfortable and more irritated and frustrated than they do fearful, unless you are really at high risk or living with somebody who's at high risk. So many of those people who aren't going back to the gym, part of that may be because they've realized I have other options. I don't have to be codependent on something else. So circling back, that's not necessarily great for gyms or, commerce necessarily the way we've known it. As an 100% online business professional, it is an opportunity for me and for the trainers that I coach and mentor. But I would love to hear your thoughts about, based on the history of surveys you've conducted, with online, with brick and mortar, or a hybrid model in fitness businesses, in the fitness industry. I'm sure you've got your antennas up just a little bit. I mean, what would you say if I said, all right, I'm forcing you to do this. I want you to look into your glass ball. What do you think the future will hold?
That's a great question. I think the pandemic has the opportunity to create a much larger divide between online and brick and mortar. And, we're an online shoe retailer. We do not want to lose brick and mortar, but we unfortunately have a major advantage right now. And in the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, when stores were completely closed, specialty retail stores were closed, we had a huge advantage. But we can't give people the same service that brick and mortar, let's say a specialty running store, can give their customers. And so I translate this into the gyms too. Like a lot of online options sprung up. And I don't necessarily think brick and mortar places need to focus on creating an online identity. I don't think they'll be able to compete with the players who have already done that. Like we've had an online identity in the shoe marketplace for 5 years. I don't think a small brick and mortar specialty running store can necessarily compete with that. But where they can compete and where gyms can compete is that personal touch, that level of service that you can only get in person. And I think people, in those spaces need to double down on that. I think to stay relevant, they really need to focus on the service aspect of their business and not try to, jump on board with some sort of online training program or online retail program just because that's where the customers are right now. Eventually, I think people will feel safe going back to the gym. Gyms are doing a great job of this. They're cleaning stations down between use. They're disinfecting the whole gym every night. They're limiting numbers. People will eventually feel comfortable going back to the gym. Once a vaccine comes out, I think people will obviously revert back to a lot of normal activity. But I think in the meantime, with the customers that you still have their attention, I think you got to focus on what you're good at. And that is that in-person level of service that us online people, we just can't offer. We can offer convenience, but we can't offer that personal touch. And there's still room for that in this world. And I hope there will always be room for that. That's what makes being alive in this world worthwhile, is creating relationships with the person at the front desk and your personal trainer and the guy helping you try on shoes at the specialty retailer. Like that should not go away. And I hope that us online people aren't helping to end that personal interaction. So I guess that's what I see in my crystal ball is, unfortunately, there's going to be a bigger divide between online and in person, but man, they're different. They're different beasts. And I don't think that we should all try to do everything. I think we should focus on what we're good at.
Great answer. So here's to, not really a conclusion to that story for fitness industry, owners, trainers, health coaches who've worked for a brick and mortar. But, what I think we really hope is that if for however long this continues without a vaccine and or without the confidence in the public yet that the vaccine is proven and works and they're returning, that those clubs that are owned by people with the heart and the head connecting, that have something to serve, they can hold on, because I think there will be a surge and a growth, that comes after this, that's pretty amazing because people know now how very much their health is valued. So, Paul, thanks so much for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, of course. And one last point you just made me think of is you asked a question between mega gyms and boutique fitness. Mm-hmm. And maybe the boutique fitness really have an edge up on this. If they can really provide that personalized service that the mega gyms can't, maybe it's a time where we really see those grow in popularity once people are confident in going back. So I'm hopeful. I honestly am. I want people to be out there exercising, having fun, staying healthy. I think this is the key to beating this pandemic is everyone staying healthy as they can. And exercise is obviously a huge component of that. So I really appreciate you having me on today. It was really fun talking with you.
Agreed. Thanks so much. And I will put the link to reach you at runrepeat.com in the show notes. And listeners, if you have a question that we didn't answer or we've stirred up some comments and you'd like to add to the conversation, please go to the show notes and that'll be at /run, no matter which site you're listening on. And both episodes will be on iTunes. Thanks for joining us today. Just want to take this moment at the end of the broadcast to let you know how very much I appreciate that you're listening and how much I would appreciate a rating and a review. At the show on iTunes, you can click there. You'll click on rating and reviews, go to the next page and leave a 5-star, of course, if I've earned it, and your comment to the show. And share it if this has helped you or given you a little insight. I know right now we're in a really tough time. Depending on who you are, you may be in a really tough time because your business is booming and you've never worked so hard in your life. I can share with you that serving the audience I serve in the way that I serve them very uniquely and knowing the marketing secrets, if you will, that I'm willing to share with anybody because they're not really secrets. So I paused to say that. But when you know the right way to connect and communicate with your audience, I've never worked harder. I've never been more successful than I have in these last 4 or 5 months during the pandemic. So if you are searching for what's the answer to me right now, surviving this and potentially thriving it, then reach out. You can find more information at either fitnessmarketingmastery.com /programs or flipping50.com /specialist, where you'll learn a little bit more about what we're up to with a brand new approach coming at the end of 2020. That's a 12-month program that'll focus on how to get known as the brand, the influencer, and change your game. Not just your clients, but yours, so you can build the business and the life that you love. What are you waiting for? The world needs you right now more than ever. Show notes will be at fitnessmarketingmastery.com /run.